Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Files Into the Darkness. I am your host, Sean Wagner. I am Director of Central Pennsylvania Investigators and also a founder of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. I also have my great co-host, as always, Gwen Purcell. How you doing, Gwen?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. And we also have our guest, excuse me.
Ghost guest.
I think I said ghost anyway at first. Eleanor Wagner, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. Great to see you.
Yes, thank you for coming on with us.
Glad to
but first of all, the results of last week's contest, and we're going to do it again. First of all, Cindy Finn, if you're out there watching or whenever you do watch this, I'd like to get you a mug from last week. Please send me an email at carc.seanw@gmail.com. And I will get you the mug from last week for being a winner. We're going to do it again this week as well. First of all, here's the mug. It's a nice little mug, has our design on. On YouTube, share this feed on YouTube and put done and your name on Facebook. So you're going to share it over to Facebook. So put done and your Facebook name on in case it differs from YouTube. And for those of you over on Facebook, you're also eligible to win. Just take and share it and put done, and we can check out that it was shared. And that's how we can tell that you would be a contestant to win. All right. Thank you for that business. Tonight, of course, we have Eleanor Wagner. She is an author and founder also of the Lady Ghostbusters out of New Jersey. She's written books called Warren County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, parts 1 and 2. Also a paranormal romance, Dream a Little Dream. She also has a children's book, which I believe is pending, not quite out yet. Janine Bean Meets Mavis the Camel. And the books can be purchased at Amazon. She also has a podcast called Eleanor Wagner Strange and Scary World. It's broadcast on the Paranormal UK radio network every other Thursday. She's also appeared on Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught on Camera. She also has a website. You can buy her books at www.authoreleanorwagner.com. How you doing, Eleanor Wagner? How are things in northern New Jersey?
Cold and snowy. It's terrible. This time of year, it's that in between. You get that 50-degree day and you're like, oh, and the sun is out and you get your stuff on to go out for that walk, and the next day it's snowing again. So we had a snow day and we were home from school yesterday. It was depressing. I'm ready for spring.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is that time of year, and it's cold around here too. We don't have too much snow on the ground. It's all melted today around here, thank God. That's always a good thing. And now we come to part for Marla, the toast. Oh, come on.
I'm ready.
I'm cupless, so.
All right. Well, there we go.
Pretend.
Cheers. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Well, how were your parents towards the paranormal when you were growing up?
You know, they were old school and we never really talked about it, though I know for sure my mom was pretty open-minded. I mean, she watched In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and she bought the National Enquirer faithfully. When I had my dream premonition, though, about my relatives, she insisted it was only a dream. And then when it actually happened, I truly feel it's what shut me down, anything I may have had for a really long time. Out of all my family members, the only one that I know experienced anything like I did was my sister Lori, because she used to tell me about stories of ghostly encounters she had in areas around the community where we lived. But she was the only one out of anybody in my family that ever talked about it. So it wasn't like nurtured or anything like that.
Right.
Can you go ahead and tell us about your experience?
I don't think there was anything one in particular that got me into the paranormal, but I've always been into everything ghostly. I grew up reading Stephen King, John Saul, and Dean Koontz. So if you know anything about them, they deal with everything horror. So I suppose that is what impacted me personally. Though I lived in a home that was haunted as a child, and I was on the main floor of the house, and that ghost only stayed on the main floor. But my bedroom, when the door was open, you could see right out into the living room in the corner where this spirit would emerge and come walking into my room until it came to the edge of my bed and stood there. And here I was, this little kid, freaking out because I didn't know what this was. Now, as an adult, I clearly know that he was just trying to get my attention because he knew that I could see him. But as a child, I didn't know. And so I was terrified. And it wasn't until my sister got married and moved out of the house and I was able to take over one of the bedrooms downstairs in the pitch black basement that I got away from the spirit on the main floor. Now, if I had the opportunity to go back, because I know he was just trying to get my attention, I would go back and apologize for being so disrespectful because I didn't know anything different. So that was the experience that goes to my home. But I was also having premonitions, and it wasn't even deja vu. It was actual premonitions of things that would happen. And some of them were just really not big deals. Like I knew I was going to go somewhere. I knew something was going to happen. But one tragically scary dream that I had involved family members. And when I woke up terrified and ran to my mother and told her about it, she was like, oh, it was nothing. It was just a nightmare. And then when it actually happened, I think it was about 12 at the time, I blamed myself because 2 people died because of what I dreamed. And I felt that that was my fault for knowing and not doing something about it. Of course, that's illogical. And now I know that. And it took me a while to realize that. But for a really long time, it terrified me and I shut down. I just was like, not having any more of this. And as I mentioned, I've always been sensitive to spirit, and I kind of call it my foofy feeling. I can walk into a building and I can feel if there's something there, whether it's good or bad. I'm empathic. As I mentioned, I have had premonitions as a kid and that one traumatic thing that shut me down. But now I'm learning a lot more about what I can do or what I'm able to do. And that's okay. You know, everybody has their time. The universe picks it for you when it's meant to happen. Mine started later, and I'm okay with that as long as I'm ready and willing and wanting to embrace it, I suppose, you know.
Absolutely.
You have to embrace it. There's nothing else you can. Otherwise, it would make things very difficult if you can't embrace it.
Sure.
Did you feel kind of crazy growing up? Did you feel, I mean, not knowing what you're experiencing and why it's happening, and you just kind of feel like the odd man? Were you
know, I was
confused?
fortunate. I was fortunate to avoid all of that because I shut down so early in life. I really didn't talk about it openly with anybody before that. It just happened, and my mom kept on, poo-pooing it like it was just a dream. So I really didn't think I was different from anybody because that's what I accepted it for what it was. And then when the incident happened, then I just shut down. So it wasn't until I was 30, the day my father died, that was like almost a reawakening moment for me, because my family had called me the night before. I was living in New Jersey at the time, and they had said, I think you better come down in the morning. You know, Dad's back in the hospital. He's having a rough time, and I don't think he's going to make it. So, of course, I did. The next, bright and early, get up, get on the car, and I was about 2 hours away from the city. So I was on the GW bridge in bumper to bumper traffic on the hottest day of the summer. And I still remember my husband and my father's voices echoing in my mind, turn off the air conditioner. It'll, if you don't, it's going to overheat your car. So there I shut this off and I got the windows open and I'm like, oh my God, just really wanting to get there. And then out of the blue, from nowhere, I'm sitting like I'm in a drive-in movie, and this screen opens up in front of my face in bumper to bumper traffic. And I see my dad, and he was funny. He used to wear shorts with knee socks and like Jesus sandals. That's what he wore. And there he is walking. But I felt all of his emotions, and they weren't good. They were anger and fear and sadness. You see, he was like one of those immigrants that worked really hard all their lives, couldn't wait for retirement. That's what they were working for. Retired in January, was diagnosed with cancer in February and gone by June. So he was also bitter too, because he felt like he was dealt a raw deal. And so as he's walking, I'm feeling his emotions. And he walks into this misty cloud of light. And out comes my husband's aunt, Anne, who had died the year before him. And she's like, "Hi, Carl. How you doing? Come on, I have others that want to see you." And so he's confused and perplexed and like excited to see her. But in his head, he knows he's not supposed to see her because she's gone. But he goes with her, and she takes him into this circle of lighted beings. And so though I couldn't see their bodies in their physical form, I knew who they were. They were his deceased brothers and sisters and parents and his best friend who had died the year before. And all of a sudden, all those negative emotions that he had totally disappeared. He was ecstatic and joyful and happy, and it just all dissipated. And there he was being embraced by these loved ones that were in this special place. And the craziest thing that happened was they parted and allowed for this beautiful cherubic-like woman to come through. And she went up to my father and she embraced him. And she said, "Hey, Daddy, it's me, Caroline." Caroline was my sister that died as an infant. She was his namesake. And here she was, this beautiful woman in heaven greeting him. And I was bawling my eyes out in this bumper to bumper traffic. I'm sitting there. I'm looking at the people in the car next to me. Now, see, if that was me, I would have went, "Oh my God, are you okay?" They're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, I'm bawling my eyes out. So I knew in that moment that he was gone. And that was his way of telling me that he was gone. And so when I say it was a reawakening, it was this really special story that I was able to tell everybody at his wake and his funeral. I'm getting all emotional now.
Me too.
It was a special moment for me because it actually brought back something that had been buried for a really long time. And now I knew that I had to do something with it. You know what I mean? But I think out of it all, what was the most special thing was actually being able to tell people that there's this other place that's there. It exists. You know, we always question it. We're always iffy about it. We're unsure. But for me, I'm totally not questioning it at all anymore. I know that it's there. I know that it exists. And my dad told me that. So him coming to me that day was not the last time that I would see him. He's come to see me plenty of times over the years. And I'm very thankful for that moment because it, like I said, it was a reawakening of something that I feel is a gift, and I really want to learn how to use it to help people. And my journey has started later in life. I mean, really, I was a mom. I raised my children. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was the Girl Scout mom. I was the 4-H mom. I was the woman who ran the women's groups and everything that I could get my hands on just to keep busy and be involved with my children. And so once they grew and are independent and flying now, it's back to what am I going to do with myself? So it fell into my lap that first book that I wrote got published, and I didn't stop writing from that point on. And I was in the middle of writing my second paranormal story when I got distracted and was at a writer's group, and the idea for writing the Haunting series came up because I do have a pretty interesting journey that people who like this sort of thing would be interested in. And I know that whenever I go to visit a different town, I'm always looking for the latest book on the haunting stories that's out there. And everybody likes a good ghost story, and you don't have to live in the town to hear about the ghost story. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a book about that. Let me just put the idea out on social media and see what kind of a response I get. And I thought that Sussex County Hauntings was just going to be one book. Put it out there, and my phone did not stop dinging for weeks. And not only was I getting people telling me stories about Sussex County, there were people sharing stories with me about other surrounding counties. So I started developing folders so that I wouldn't lose any of these stories, because I figured if I get enough of them, I'll write about that county too. So Sussex County Hauntings ended up being 1 and 2, and currently I'm working on 3, which is pretty cool. And like you mentioned earlier, Sean, Warren County Hauntings came out last October because it was one of the folders that I had an extensive amount of stories that I felt could warrant a book. And I was going to start working on Pike County Hauntings, but I was explaining to Sean earlier, Morris County has been coming to the forefront. So that might be the next book in the Haunting series. And the other strange phenomena category that was added into the book spontaneously to add chapters to the end of the book actually came to fruition because when those people were messaging me about their stories, they were coming to me about stories having to do with Bigfoot and having to do with UFOs in the area. So Bigfoot and UFOs don't really fit into the ghostly category. So if I put other strange phenomena, I could put them in there. And Bigfoot ended up being one of the biggest chapters in that first book, which is pretty cool. So I was really glad that I did do that because when I was writing the more recent books, it enabled me to have like a broader horizon to different topics that weren't necessarily ghostly, but were just as interesting. For example, in book 2, I wrote about people's visits with their deceased loved ones. I'm sorry, visits from their deceased loved ones. And then I also wrote about people who were with their loved ones at their time of death. Those are really poignant stories. I mean, if you're with somebody, your loved one, at the time that they're dying, it's amazing what they see and what they say and who they're talking to. And there are other stories of faith and helping people with their grieving process, that their loved one isn't going away forever, that they do come back and visit whenever they want to. So those were great stories. And then when I was writing Warren County Hauntings, I decided to write about near-death experiences, which turned out to be an awesome chapter and a great experience for me because the people that I had spoken to had never spoken to anybody outside of their near-death experiencer groups, only because they were afraid of ridicule and unacceptance. And here I was, this author saying, I'll tell your story to the world if you want to share it with me. And so for them to have that faith in me and allow me to do that really brought us together very closely in friendship. And these people are friends for life now. I mean, that's how close I got to them, that I feel like they're family almost. And those stories are pretty cool, what those people experienced and how it changed their lives for the better because they know what's there and what to expect. And so now with the Sussex County Hauntings 3 that I'm working on, I'm definitely going to have a chapter on reincarnation. And I have some great stories about children talking to their parents about who they were before and adults who found out who they were. Now, if you remember, Sean, you said you read Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena. So you'll remember the story about Art Peterson, who was a member of the Lady Ghostbuster team. He knows he was reincarnated and he actually found out who he was. And if you remember the picture, the side-by-side picture of the two of them, they look like the same person, which happens in all of these cases. If they're able to find out who they were and they compare a picture of themselves now to who they were, there's no denying there is a resemblance. So just all of this stuff is very interesting. I just love talking to these people and learning these stories and writing about them.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, can you share a story or two related to what you just talked about? The near-death.
Which one, like the near-death experience? Well, in near-death, sure, near-death experience. I had, believe it or not, I had an incarcerated young man reach out to me because I was on like a Facebook page and was looking for people who wanted to share their near-death experiences. He was incarcerated at the time, and he reached out to me, and this was a journey of over probably almost 2 years, I want to say, from when I first met him to when I actually finished the book and was ready to publish. So he was already incarcerated when we connected, and he was sharing his story with me. And he knew from his near-death experience what was going to happen to himself, where he was going to end up, and that he was meant to come back, and that he was meant to have this journey. And there was a reason for his life. And it came full circle. That's the point I'm trying to make, is when he finally got out, he did end up where he was told he would when he was in heaven. And he had visually seen a picture of the house that he was going to live in with his parents. And when he got out, he didn't know his parents had moved. And when he went to this place, there it was. what he had seen in heaven. And he sent me pictures of the location in England, with this little bridge by the water with the creek and the woods. And it was exactly what they told him about in heaven. So those are the kind of things that these people experience. And it was amazing to him because he wanted a purpose in life and he wanted to change his life, and he did for the better, which was great.
That's
a
awesome.
shout out to Digby Jones, shouting out to you, bud.
Do you have a story as well you could share about the like family members that were nearby at the time that the loved one died, for example? From
one of them, John Cartmill. Hi, I'm sure you're going to be listening in. He and his wife were at, I believe it was her grandfather's passing, and the whole family was gathered to say their last goodbyes. And he was joyful and happy, and he had this amazing glowing light about him. And the room was like on the darker side. It wasn't daytime. So it wasn't as if you could have said the sunlight was coming in through the window or that there was a light behind his head. It wasn't anything like that. And if you see the pictures, you can actually see it's this glow, which you would call like a heavenly glow. And they took pictures of it because they were just so amazed that this is what was emanating from him prior to him passing. And what I like about the books, Sean, is that I try and post those pictures in there so that people can see them. But I also allow for them to go to my website where they can see them in color too. They can go into the galleries on my website, and they can actually listen to the audio footage that we get over time, or the video footage, or if somebody sends me in something, they can always see it there. So although the picture is in the middle of the book itself, if you wanted to see the actual color photo of it, you can go to the website. So yeah, that was amazing to them. And and he died very shortly after that, within like an hour or so. And they were happy to have gotten those pictures, that they could just share them, that they knew that there was something special going on there.
Have you heard any stories? Did anyone tell you any stories that really like creeped you out?
Oh, sure. There's plenty of them. And we talked about this, Sean, too, because I mean, everybody says, what's your favorite story? And there are so many that I can choose from. But the Deb Zielinski story, and Deb is also now a member of Lady Ghostbusters. She's actually one of my original members from the beginning. She's very sensitive, and she's a nurse. And so nurses see a lot of shit. And you can go to any nurse and they'll be able to tell you stuff. And they kind of prepare people for it. They know when something happens within a certain period of time, that person's going to die, just because they just know. So she was working in the night shift, and she would see Death a couple of times. And when she saw Death himself, he was really unassuming, because he was just, this guy in a trench coat and a hat, and not what she exactly pictured him to be, but she would see when he comes out of a resident's room, and she would know that it was just a matter of time. Sometimes it was like 2 weeks before, if not closer, that their time was coming to an end very, very shortly. But she did see the bad side of death, which I'd like to say is whoever it is that comes to get somebody to take them to hell. And that's what she referred this thing to. But it terrified her and the two girls that were on shift so much that, I mean, Deb is a pretty strong girl and can handle a lot of stuff. And she's tough. And for her to be affected by this as much as the other two, like the other two were on their knees praying and crying because they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Well, yeah, it was described as when they peered in the doorway, they saw this black, featureless, Nosferatu-like figure with tree-like limbs hovering over the woman in her bed. And
oh my gosh,
the thing heard them when they came to the door, and it snapped its head in their direction, and they could see piercing red eyes staring wickedly at them. And then when it wanted to take off, it just kind of slipped and slithered out the window, disappearing. And it was huge. It was like 7 feet tall, they said. And her and these two women that she worked with saw this, and how she knows that this was hell coming to get this woman, because this woman was nasty bitch. I mean, she was nasty and mean to the people that worked there. In life, she thought her shit didn't stink, and she was in for a pretty surprise where she was going, I'll tell you that much. So yeah.
Wow.
But that's how she described hell. Creepy, right? I mean, I think of that when she told me that. I think of it like I was watching a horror movie. Like, that would scare the shit out of me.
Funny
you
thing,
know?
Oh my God.
when we had Liz on, Liz told a very similar story about an evil or demonic type feature that was an old man, except for it had like branches going out from it. Maybe not the same thing, but actually very similar description anyway. Amazing. I know it's back a little bit, but can you tell us, you're also part of the Lady Ghostbusters. Can you tell us about Lady Ghostbusters?
I founded it in 2019, and it really just was accidental. I was doing interviewing for the first Hauntings book, and I connected with the president at the Sterling Hill Mines Museum in Ogdensburg, New Jersey. And when I was talking to him, he invited me to bring my paranormal team into the mines and on their grounds so that we could investigate and maybe find stuff so that he wouldn't feel so crazy, because he's a scientist, and he says he's not supposed to believe in this kind of stuff, and he just can't explain what happened to him. So I think he kind of wanted affirmation from other people on the outside of that facility to tell him, you're not crazy, don't worry about it, it's happening. So he said, yeah, bring your paranormal team. And I'm like, great, thank you. I was so excited to get this opportunity in this interview, but I didn't have a paranormal team. So here I'm like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to put one together. So at that point, I had already interviewed, about 100 people, and they're just ordinary people like you and I, and they are gifted and like to help and do this sort of thing. So at the time, I reached out to 5 women, and 3 of them took me up on my offer, and they came on that investigation. And then I invited Art Peterson and Liz Peterson and 2 people that he had worked with in the past. And they came along, and we went into the mines to do this investigation. It was probably one of the best things I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, if you hear anybody tell you that when you go into those mines, it's scary and they're horrible spirits, don't believe a word of it, because it's not true. Those spirits are like a brotherhood, and they are so welcoming, and they're so excited that you're there and that you can experience them and hear them. And all they want to do is be acknowledged and tell their story. And we had some crazy shit happen to us that night. But out of the one thing, we all had our cameras going at the same time, because we were like there with the cameras. Let's see what we can get, taking pictures and going with the video. And we all had our videos going on at the same time when we experienced this kind of like smoky, foggy mass that was communicating with us. And when I got home and everybody shared the footage with me, I went through what I thought was the best out of the whole groups, and I sent it into Paranormal Caught on Camera, and they liked it so much that they ended up featuring us on an episode of their show. But that's how Lady Ghostbusters was formed. And ever since then, people have been reaching out to me and saying, can you bring your group into my building? I have stuff going on. And obviously, with me continuing to write the books and get stories, if I'm able to get into a location with the people, then it's just another chapter in my book. So I jump at the chance of doing that. And before COVID, we were doing like an investigation every single weekend. And, now we're starting to get back into the swing of things again, but COVID kind of put a stop to everything. So
that's pretty good. Every week doing a paranormal investigation. That's really good.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We do have what you just talked about. We have that clip. Brenda, can you go play the paranormal or Paranormal Caught on Camera? Yeah, we have part of that clip.
And on that day in the mine, the Lady Ghostbusters were quickly made aware of that oppression when they found themselves suddenly confronted with a strange presence.
There's the smoke again. There's the smoke again. Oh my God.
Over and over again, a white everyone watching.
That's incredible. Wow.
Eventually, the mist even seems to happen on demand from Marianne.
Show us your presence by making the smoke show up in my camera again. Not gonna do it. There it is. There it is. Oh my god. Looks like he's smoking. Yeah.
I was giddy. It was so exciting that we were actually making that connection. First thing I tried to do was debunk it, like breathing into the camera, making sure it wasn't like, you know, your breath in a camera type thing, and it wasn't.
Oh my god.
And I can tell you that the entire mine was clear and devoid of any kind of smoke or fog or insects whatsoever. It was just blank black chamber, and then all of a sudden you have this happen and appear. It was definitely stunning to all of us, and everyone was so excited.
Pretty crazy. And here's something else that happened that you'd really appreciate. The mines are not functioning anymore. They have been non-functioning since I believe it was the 80s. And before they started recording deaths, there were like hundreds of deaths that were never recorded. And then when they started recording them, there were plenty of them. So you just kind of to realize the number of lives that were lost in explosions and cave-ins in the mine. And we were walking over these grates in one of the caverns. And all of a sudden, I think there was 6 of us walking over these grates. And all of a sudden, we hear dynamite going off down in the levels below us. And we all stop and we're like, oh my God. Now, clearly, that was residual energy of their normal daily life of, you know, setting off dynamite and working in the mines. But for it to happen to us that night while we were there was really, really cool.
I can imagine it would be.
So we have a question from Cindy. She wants to know if you tell the spirits they are dead and that they can go to the light. Do you ever help them move on?
That's a great question, Cindy. I personally like to do that. I know some people don't, and we did try to do it when we were in the mines that night, and this is what ended up happening. Because of the number of souls that were there, even though some of that group would have gone into the light, some of them did not want to. And because of that brotherhood that I was just speaking about, they didn't want to leave anybody behind. So they all decided to stay. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing that even in death and ghostmen, they have a like kinship with each other, that they don't want to leave each other.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah. But we do try to tell spirit about the light, just in case that they don't or know or are unaware. Some of them are afraid to go into the light because they're afraid of rejection or judgment. And we try to explain to them that there is peace and love and non-judgmental feeling and emotion on the other side. And the good thing for the spirit, we try to tell them, is if you go into the light, you can come back and forth as often as you want. But if you don't go into the light, you're kind of stuck here. And more often than not, we're able to get them to move on. So it just depends on how attached to this realm that spirit is, whether they want to stay behind or not.
All right. Again, everyone, for anyone who just joining us, our guest is Eleanor Wagner. She has written books, Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, parts 1 and 2, as well as Warren County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena. And also a romance book, Dream a Little Dream, which we'll get into in just a moment, and a children's book, which, one second, sorry.
That's all right.
Janine Mavis the Cam. I had to go back up and make sure I got the title correct. Didn't have it memorized. But anyway, can you tell us about, it's a little bit off topic, I think, but you talk about your romance book, Dream a Little Dream.
Sure. It's a paranormal story. It's along the lines, well, one of those quick reads that keeps you on the edge of your seat to the very end. If you're a fan of King, Koontz, and Saul, they have always been my inspiration because that's who I grew up reading. And then you'll love this paranormal romance horror story. That's what it is.
That's cool. Also, what other books do you have pending? Since we're on the book subject.
Well, I'm working on Sussex County Hauntings 3. And I am working on another paranormal book, which is taking me longer, obviously, because the demand for those hauntings books. I mean, people keep on saying, we want more. So I'm focusing more on those. And when I have the extra time, working on finishing the other. But I do have that children's series the first one is with the illustrator right now. She's a young girl out of Highland Lakes, New Jersey, Kiana Curtin. She's doing my illustrations. And I'm looking forward to that book coming out so that I can get the other ones in the series going as well.
You can talk about it a little bit as well, if you like. What's included in the book?
Children's books? The children's books are about a little girl, a little precocious little girl named Janine Bean and her friends. And so each of the book, you get to learn about the friends, and all of the friends are very distinguishable about who they are and what they're like and their adventures. So like I mentioned, the first one is Janine Bean meets Mavis the camel. It's kind of based on that story about Sally the camel, who ends up being a horse at the end. It's kind of along those lines that got me going on the story. But, when you're doing second grade reader books, you want to make them fun and exciting and relatable for the kids. So that's what it is. And I work in kindergarten. I work in a school with kindergarten first graders and second graders during the day. So they were my inspiration for those books.
That sounds great. And also just a reminder, I forgot to say, anyone does have any questions, please feel free to put it all in all capital letters. That'll help make it easier for us to distinguish questions in the comments as well. Also, you are also in a podcast now, Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World on the Paranormal UK network. How's that going?
It's going good. That actually fell into my lap also. A friend of mine planted the seed. She said, Jen, my friend Jen Glenn, she said, Eleanor, I really think you should do a podcast. And I was actually a little afraid when she first said it. And then when she put it into my head, I was like, you know what? I might take the summer to look into it. So I started picking people's brains that I knew that were out in the industry about what to do, what kind of equipment. And Mark Johnson, who's the gentleman I am affiliated with in Paranormal UK Radio Network, he was a huge help to me. He was the one who told me what equipment I should get and helped me download, upload, get started. And I had remembered him mentioning to me that his station was always looking for new shows. So it stuck in my head. And when I was ready to kind of get that mission statement together, I said to him, who could I pitch my idea to? And he goes, me, I own half the station. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So I got myself ready like I was going in an interview and presented it to him. And he was like, I like that. Let's do it. So I was like, okay. And so I did. And I'm glad I'm doing it biweekly right now because it is time consuming. Maybe one day down the line, I'll get to doing it once a week. But right now I'm okay with biweekly, but I am really enjoying the interviews and meeting the people that I do and making those connections. So, but it's like you said, biweekly, and it's out of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, but it's available wherever you get your podcasts. So
awesome. Yeah. Oh yeah. This a broadcast every other week is certainly a lot of work. Who do you have? Anyone you can tell us coming up as guests, or are you just talk yourself the whole time? Or
no, I think that would be pretty boring. I'll be having well-renowned psychic Lauren Robbins on, and well-known hypnotist Mike Mesmer, astrologist Richard Clarkson, historical medium Kimberly Geiler. All very interesting topics and discussions. I've this week I had Jane Doherty on. She's also a well-known psychic and medium, and I have taken some of the people that I interviewed in my books and brought them into interviews because I feel like if you've read about them in the book, it'd be nice to actually hear them in person. For example, Nick Frasci, he's the elderly gentleman who was a Patterson police officer who was at the scene of the Wanacue UFO sighting in the 60s. And he was there when it happened and didn't talk about it for years. He and his partner didn't say anything to anyone about it because they didn't want to be called crazy and they didn't want to lose the opportunity of being promoted in the police department. So they shut their mouth about it. But as soon as he retired, he started telling the world what happened, what he saw, who he dealt with. He actually was in touch with Dr. Hynek, who was part of the Project Blue Book from the government. So he had to work with that gentleman during that whole thing. And I had him on the show, which was really interesting as well. So
very nice.
Indeed,
Yeah.
very
So
nice.
you touched on it a little bit earlier in the broadcast here about Bigfoot. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I've always been open-minded. I definitely believe that there's a possibility that it exists, especially since one of the more recent stories that I have in the book happened in 2019 in Vernon.
Oh, wow.
Over by Bassett's Bridge Road, to my friend, who I've changed her name in the book because she didn't want anybody to know that it happened to her. But her incident was she has a rental home in that area for like weekenders, right? And she was going there at night, later in the night, to set things up because they were going to arrive shortly. They were going to arrive by like 11 o'clock that night or whatever. And she wanted to go and just drop off stuff or whatever. And as she's pulling out of the driveway, it's a summer night and she's got the windows open. She hears this loud scream. And she's on the phone with her boyfriend. And he's like, what the heck was that? She goes, oh, I have no idea, but I'm getting out of here really quick. And so she starts driving down the mountain and going over Lake Owassa, which is this tiny little road that separates the swamps on both sides. And all of a sudden she sees this thing, this huge creature, come from one side over onto the other side, but go over the side like it's nothing. Now, if it were you and I going over this rail, we'd literally have to hold onto the rail and climb down the embankment because you're going down into this one. This thing just like paced it like it was walking across the street like it was nothing. And so she was so stunned by this incident, she ends up calling up her friend and she tells her friend, and her friend's like, what? And her friend was one of those people that goes right on Facebook and goes, my friend is crazy. She thinks she just saw Bigfoot. And when she said that, she prompted, because it was literally the day that it happened, the night that it happened, right? She posts this. Another one of their friends sees it and she goes, where did she think that she saw this? And so the friend that she spoke to lived in the direction that this thing was headed. And they had a sighting with it. They were all by a campfire and they saw this thing, and all the husbands jumped on their ATVs and took off going after this thing and could not catch it. So it was just not coincidental that she had this sighting and it was headed in the direction where her friend lived, and they just happened to be out there and catch this. So that she was like, no, she's not crazy because we saw something too. So that was as early as 2019. That was the last one that I got that was very recent. And there are way more than that in book one, as you've read, Sean. And I had another incident that was shared in book two. And I think I had one in Warren County. And because I do update books with current chapters from other ones. If I get stories like in Sussex 3, there are going to be 2 Bigfoot stories. They're not more recent, but they're still from the county, and I am going to put them into the book because people who have already read the others have like to hear more of the same, you know.
Absolutely.
What part of the county are you getting the reports in, may I ask? For those that live in Sussex
County.
Okay. Do you know what part of Sussex County they're coming from?
The incident that I just spoke to you about, as I mentioned, was on the border of Vernon and Wantage, because when you come over a Bassett's Bridge Road, you're coming from Vernon into Wantage. And Unionville, New York, it's kind of like that little, but I can actually look up all the other locations if you want to know, because I know that you guys are probably in the vicinity where you could come and check it out one of these days if you wanted to. High Point State Mountain, though, High Point State Mountain was where the bulk of the stories happened.
Wow.
We've gone there and done an expedition or two around High Point.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful park too. I went there with Big Larson during the daytime.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is beautiful. I'm 5 minutes from High Point, so we go hiking there quite a lot when the weather's nice. Yeah, so if you do come up this way, look me up.
We can do that.
I know we were talking about the ghost show, and I know we're talking about Bigfoot now, but
Yeah,
We're going off on tangents here.
that's fine. I gotta ask, someone asked me as well, and Chuck asked me in particular, do you have a shop as well in Sussex County?
I did. At one point, when we first moved into Wantage, I owned an antique shop on Main Street in Sussex, and that was also haunted. And so that was another story to add to that first book about my experiences. And it was not just me that saw that spirit. My co-owner, who we were in business together, she saw him as well. And then the renters from upstairs in the apartment, they had an experience too. In fact, when I was there at the shop one day, she would come down in the morning and say, "Hey, we want a cup of tea," and we just chit chat. And I think she was just biding her time about asking, because at one point she goes, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." And I'm like, "Sure, what?" She goes, "Well, I was wondering if you saw anything strange." And at this point I was like, "Yeah, an old guy." And she goes, "Yeah, wearing a top hat?" And I said, "Yeah, and a long trench coat." And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Wow, we see the same guy." And he was throughout the whole building, because he'd be on my floor and on her floor, because it was a 3-story building. He would be
Oh, wow.
observing us when we were doing inventory. And he just kind of like just observed us and watched and, I guess made sure we were being good or were not doing anything bad to his building. And when I did the research for the book, there was another family that came out of the woodwork too, that had rented one of the floors in the building, who had experience with their family. So I was able to, and he saw the same old guy, was the same old guy. So I was able to collaborate all those people's accounts in one chapter. But here's a really cool part of it. When I owned the shop, I had a customer come in, and she says, "I have this black and white photo of your store back in the day. I thought you'd like to have it and hang it maybe up behind your register." I'm like, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you." And she hands me the picture, and the guy standing in front of the building is the old guy that I was seeing.
Oh,
wow.
So I
that's
was
awesome.
like, "Oh my God." Now, to me, that's no coincidence. I am sure he meant for me to get that picture, because although I was not able to get a name to his face, I got his face in his picture. So he must have been like the proprietor of the store at the time, but it was definitely not a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences anyway. So
No.
that was really cool.
I think definitely. Can you tell us, I know you're in the book, you wrote that your co-owner of the business, she was a little rough on her beliefs in terms of the guests there. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, that first incident, when the first time we saw him when we were doing inventory, I kind of like just looked up and he was there, and I was like, "Hey, look up. Do you see anything?" And she's like, "No, I don't see anything there. There's nothing there." So I knew she did. And then she ended up ultimately having another encounter by herself with the spirit. She used to take care of her husband's grandma, Rose, and would bring her with her frequently to the shop and just sit her in this little rocker in the front of the shop. And she would just stay there the whole time. And she would sit her there, and she'd go next door and get a coffee and a muffin, and then come back and into the store for the day. And this one time she was doing her routine. She went to go next door and get her muffin and her tea, and then come back. And when she came back, she saw Grandma Rose with her little black hat walking around the racks in the back of the store. And then she realized she didn't have Grandma Rose with her that day. And she was like, "Oh, that's not Grandma Rose." So she finally said, "You can't come here. I'm not Eleanor. So when she's here, it's fine. But when she's not, I don't want you near me." But he didn't bother us. He was just there, So I don't know what made her freak out so much, but it is what it is. She admitted to it eventually anyway when I was reading the book. So when I was writing the book, excuse me. Yeah.
So did you have any haunted items in your store that you had things
I'm
happen
sure that we must have, but I never picked up on anything. No, but the other antique shops in town definitely have had other things that have happened where pieces have moved from one side to another. And so they've actually gotten into the habit of saging them, because they don't want anything in their buildings. And they don't want to send people home with stuff either, because you are going to get attachments to older items, but I never did pick up on anything that I had personally.
There was also a story of a woman that was kind of rough, haunting it was in the floor or whatever, in the floor
You're breaking
of
up.
the place, and she wanted to be discovered or something. Do you know that
You're
story?
breaking up. I couldn't understand what you said.
There was a story also you wrote, which was also really good, which I liked, which involved a possible woman trying to get attention that she existed, and she was kind of mean to people, and then.
Are you
Can you hear
talking to
me?
me in the book?
Yes, from the book. Yes, from Sussex County 1. All right.
Okay.
Well,
Can you refresh my memory?
okay. Well, I think that it wanted attention, and it got him to open up the floor, and she was supposed to be down there on the floor, and they helped her move on or something to that effect.
Oh, okay. That
she
was
felt better
in a,
once she realized they were not trying to steal the plate, the belongings from
yeah.
her.
That was in an estate shop in Newton, and she wasn't in the basement. She was in the shop, and she
Okay.
was causing a lot of havoc in the building for the man. But he was kind of like ignoring it and almost in denial. But it got to a point where he really wanted to do something about it. And the straw that broke the camel's back was all of the neighboring stores one night, well, more than one night, were hearing a woman screaming, "Let me out! Let me out!" So much that called to come to the building checking things out, and they couldn't find anything, but they were concerned that there might be this woman being held in this building. So when this owner came, they asked for permission to go and have him look in the building, and he was like, "Have at it." So he let them in, and they did their whole, and obviously didn't find anything, and then they left the premises. But at that point, the gentleman knew he had to get help. So he reached out to Dave Brown, who is a well-known psychic. He and his wife are both well-known in the field in Virginia, but he was a Sussex County resident, grew up in this area. Actually, his mom, Nell, was a friend of mine. She used to do readings for me for years before she passed away. But he contacted him and asked him to come and see if he could figure out what was going on. So when Dave goes in, he locks himself in the room, and this guy's standing outside the door, and he hears Dave talking, having this one-sided conversation because he's talking to the spirit, but he can only hear Dave, right? And so Dave, he comes out and he says, "Yeah, you're haunted. You have a spirit of a lady in here, and she's not really happy about you moving furniture out constantly." But he said, I tried to explain to her that you keep on moving furniture in, so it's really not that big of a deal. And when I kind of got her to understand what it is that you're doing, she's okay with it, and she won't bother you anymore. And so she didn't.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
And-
But one of my favorite stories, though, is the house on Shotwell Road. It's like a simple and short story, but you hear these kind of things a lot over time. It's this little old lady who lived next door to this family, and she loved her garden, and she would always have flowers blooming all over. I mean, you go into her garden and you go, "Oh my God, this is so beautiful," right? Because she had them blooming all over the place. And the day that she died, the flowers all died. They were blooming the day before, but the day she died, they were all dead.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
That one I like. That's yeah.
How would you
Very
describe your abilities?
How would I describe what?
Your abilities.
They're not as good as half the people that I know. I'm working on it, and I'm learning every day, and I definitely notice that I'm able to fit pieces to the puzzle together as well, which makes me all excited when we're all together as a group, and all that energy that we put into something. I do have pieces of the puzzle that I put in, and that is very exciting for me, because it's like, oh, I helped. You know what I mean? But I call it my foofy feeling. I can sense spirit, and I know if it's good or bad. And the way I communicate is by using my pendulum or my dowsing rod to get yes and no responses from spirit. But I always have my K2, which is a meter that helps with energy. And then I always have my audio going so that I can bring it home and listen to whether I got any EVPs on it. But I'm also very good when I take photographs of catching things in mirrors or windows. And I know that there's a division in the field about what that is. But if I don't go home and look at them, I don't know if I'm going to find anything. And that's how I got one of my best catches in the cemetery. I must have taken about 80 pictures that night. And when I went home and I was looking at them, I ended up finding this figure of this apparition, one half of him in one photo, because I did them in succession. I get 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In one photo, I got a half of him. And in the next picture, I got a whole piece of him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's like wearing this long riding jacket and he's got an ascot and a really handsome ghost. And I'm like, he definitely wanted me to see him. If I didn't look in those pictures and find it, I wouldn't have known that it was there. So.
Very nice, by the way, on 3 pictures at a time. I always tell people, in fact, I posted on Reddit today to somebody to take 3 pictures at a time. That way you have comparison to. And it makes it so much easier when trying to tell if you might have something or not.
A couple of weeks back, we did an investigation at a library in Boonton, and one of my medium friends wasn't able to make it that night. So I sent her. She just said, "Where is it? What's the name of it?" So I sent her the actual photograph that was on the website to show her the building, because she could get like a sense from that. And so she sent me a message back right away. She goes, "Oh, I see the 2 guys in the window. Who were they?" At the time,
Wow.
I didn't know, but the original owner of that house had 2 sons that had passed away. So I was like, wow, maybe that's who that is. And so we went on and we had the investigation. Like I said, she wasn't able to come that night. So I took, like I said, tons of pictures. And I did take pictures of the outside because you can spot a lot of stuff that way. And when I was at home, just going through them, I looked in, because she had seen the 2 figures in the lower window in the library itself. Well, I'm looking at the pictures, and on the second floor in the window, I see these 2 figures again that she saw, that she pointed out. And I'm like, not believing myself. Like, I shouldn't doubt myself that much, but I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm looking and I'm seeing other faces, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to circle anything. I'm just going to send it to her and a couple of other people and see if they see anything. And they send it back, and they've got what I saw circled. And we're like, yeah, she goes, there's the 2 that I saw in the downstairs window. And I see this, that, and the other thing. I'm going, okay, well, I'm not crazy. I see it too, so they're there. So we're actually going back again, because it was such a great place. I mean, it's one of those beautiful old buildings, and they gave us free reign. We got to go in there and just have it to ourselves. That's like a picnic, you know what I mean? It's like, woohoo, we're going in there all by ourselves, nobody with us. So we're going back there, and we're going back to the Elks Club in Boonton too, which was a great one. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's it. They got to lower these gas prices now. I have to travel. I don't want to have to pay through my nose to get to where I got to go. It's frustrating.
Right. Oh, yeah, gas prices are. There's no stop to that.
Oh my God! Holy crap! I feel like I'm 8 years ago during the summer when I had to put money away on the side just to put the gas in my car. Driving me nuts.
All right. Well, that's mostly what we had. Anyone have any questions in chat by chance?
I don't see anything.
I want to take then and do you have anything else before I start the outro? Gwen?
No, I'm good. It was wonderful talking to her.
Oh, it definitely
thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
Thank
Next time I'm on, I'm sure I'll have a whole bunch of other stories to share at that point.
That's better. We'd like to have you on another time. Guarantee that.
Absolutely.
Brenda, can you show the books she has coming up? She's the author of books titled Warren County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, Parts 1 and 2, as well as the paranormal romance Dream a Little Dream, and the children's book Janine Bean Meets Mavis the Camel. They can be purchased at Amazon, and she's also the host of a podcast, Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World, on the Paranormal UK radio network. Her website is www.authoreleanorwagner.com. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Also, We appreciate all of you, and thank you for following us from our channel. Next week, our guest will be March 24th. We'll have on Dave Speaks from History Channel's The Unexplained, seasons 1 and 2, as well as Terror in the Woods. Can you please list the future guests then for the show? Thank you. March 31st, we're back on 1 week later then with Barry Fitzgerald from Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. Then on April 14th, we will have the skeptical psychic Nancy Dutertre. Sorry if I butchered that up, Nancy. April 28th, we'll have Heather Tad. She was on Paranormal State and currently on Alien Highway. And then May 26th, we'll have Katie Burr on from Everyday Paranormal and Ghost Lab. All right. Also, and that about wraps it up. Brendan, go ahead and take us out.
Hey, this is Chuck Larson. You're watching the CARC channel on YouTube.
You've been watching Paranormal Files Into the Darkness, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARC Universal today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC.